All right, today we get to crack open a recently declassified case file from the very early days of the United Nations, and this thing is fascinating. It's a story about human rights, broken promises, and a legal showdown that happened right at the peak of the Cold War. And the best part, we're going to see it all unfold through the actual official documents from the time. Okay, let's get into it. So, here's how we're going to break this case down. First, we'll look at the one big question that got this whole thing started. Then we'll see how nations around the world started taking sides. We'll even uncover a tiny last-minute correction that had huge consequences. After that, we'll see the court's first big decision, followed by, well, a dramatic silence, which just pushed the whole case into a brand new, unexpected phase. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the late 1940s. The United Nations is brand new, and it's already facing one of its first major tests. There are serious allegations of human rights abuses tied to the peace treaties that were signed right after World War II. And this document right here is what kicked it all off. The UN General Assembly was getting really worried about what was happening in Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania. So they went straight to the International Court of Justice. They basically said, hey, we need your help. We need some legal clarity on how we're supposed to interpret the peace treaties these countries signed. And this, right here, was the heart of the matter. I mean, the entire case hinged on this one seemingly simple question. See, if these human rights allegations legally counted as a dispute, then a whole bunch of clauses in the treaties would suddenly kick in, forcing these countries to deal with the problem. But was it a dispute? That was the million-dollar question for the court. Now, it's important to know the UN wasn't technically suing anyone. They were asking for something called an advisory opinion. You can think of it like asking the world's top legal experts for their official interpretation of the law. And while it's not binding, like a verdict in a trial, its political and moral power is absolutely huge. It was a really smart way to get answers and apply pressure. So, the court gives every country that signed the treaties a deadline, January 16th, 1950. They had until then to send in their legal arguments. And what happened next was just this flurry of diplomatic activity that laid bare the deep, deep political cracks of the early Cold War. And what's so wild is that you can see these fault lines appearing almost instantly. On the one hand, you've got countries like New Zealand sending a polite no thanks, saying they don't want to get involved. But on the other hand, you have the United Kingdom, who not only sent in a formal statement, but also appointed a special agent to argue their case. The world was definitely choosing sides. And that divide becomes crystal clear when you just look at the list. You've got the US, the UK, and Australia all filing arguments on one side. And on the other, the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries at the center of it all, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania, filing their own statements with let's just say, a very different point of view. The lines were drawn in the sand. So right in the middle of all this high-stakes diplomacy, this little procedural drama starts to unfold. It all began with what looked like a really minor request for a correction from the UK. But as it turns out, it had surprisingly big implications for their whole argument. And here's the actual letter. It's from the UK's agent, G. Fitzmaurice, sent just 10 days after the deadline. He's writing to the court asking them to fix something in their formal statement. You know, this just goes to show you how incredibly meticulous these international legal battles really are. Every single word matters. Now, in his letter, Fitzmaurice tries to play it cool. He calls it only a formality, saying the substance is exactly the same. He's basically trying to say, hey, no big deal, just a little typo. But as we're about to see, the details he wanted to fix were anything but a formality. Okay, so check this out. There were two key changes. First, a simple date correction for some diplomatic notes. But the second one, this was the big one. The UK changed its original filing from providing the gist of the notes to providing the actual text. And that right there is a massive difference. It meant their legal argument was now built on the exact final words sent to these countries, not just a summary. It made their case so much stronger. All right, so all the statements are in, the last-minute corrections have been made, and now the stage is set for the first major climax of this case. The court scheduled public hearings and got ready to deliver its much-anticipated opinion. And look how fast this all moves. The deadline for statements was mid-January. Public hearings kicked off at the end of February. And just 1 month later, by March 30th, the court was ready. The whole world was watching. And here it is, the verdict, delivered by telegram on March 30th. And the court's opinion was,
Well, it was decisive. By a huge margin, 11-3, they said yes, a formal legal dispute does exist. And by that same 11-3 vote, they ruled that yes, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania were legally required by the treaties to appoint representatives to commissions to sort this all out. This was a massive win for the Western powers.
Now, the court's opinion wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a stopwatch. It started a 30-day countdown. Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania had exactly 1 month to follow the ruling and name the representatives. And this, right here, set the stage for an even more dramatic showdown. And this telegram right here, this is the moment of truth. It marks the end of that 30-day period. It was sent on May 1st, 1950, from the UN's acting Secretary General to the President of the Court. And what it says is just, wow. That's the key line. The 30-day deadline came and went, and the UN had heard nothing. Not a word. No notices, no appointments, zero communication. The three countries at the very center of this global dispute had just responded with complete and utter silence. But here's the thing, and this is so clever, the UN totally saw this coming. Their original request to the court was structured with this exact possibility in mind. So the silence from Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania didn't kill the case. It just automatically triggered the next part of the investigation. Yeah, their silence wasn't a dead end. Instead, it forced the court to move into phase 2, which was all about an even more fundamental question of international law. What on earth do you do when one side of a legal dispute just refuses to even show up? And so the wheels of justice just kept turning. The court immediately set a new deadline, June 5th, 1950, for countries to weigh in on this new phase. The case was now way beyond just these specific treaties. It was heading into totally uncharted territory about the true power and authority of international law itself. And that really leaves us with the core question this whole case file brings up. You can have a clear treaty. You can have a decisive opinion from the world's highest court. But what happens when a country just decides to ignore it all? It forces us to ask a question that is still incredibly relevant today. What is the real power of international law when it's met with a wall of silence?